welcome to There Will Always Be Another Book. Today we are talking about Dune by Frank Herbert. So, you can probably already see, if you've clicked on this video, this is going to be a long video. I know I've joked in other videos that, I want to keep this short, and then the video ends up just being 13 minutes long anyway. This is going to be a long video. As you can probably tell, I have a lot of notes to get through with Dune, but I do have a sort of loose structure in mind for this video. But before I do that, just go over a couple of quick introductory things. This is obviously a 5-star book, and starting in 2020, about halfway through 2020, was when I got back into reading because I went back to university and I decided that the train times would be dedicated purely for reading. And that was really great, got me back into reading. But since then, more than 2 years now, I have not reread a book. I've read probably over 100 books, but I have not reread a book until Dune. I first read this in May of 2021, and I reread it again just this year, and this was such a great experience. I read, like I said, I read it in May of last year, which was funny because it was before the film came out, before the 2021 film came out. So I was able to be the guy who had read the book, but I also read the book so late and in the same year as the movie coming out that for people who had read the book way before, they're able to say like, oh, it's just a poser, it's just reading the book because of the film. So I'm hated on both sides, which is awesome. But anyway, I really fell in love with this book the first time I read it, and this will come up later, but I have gone on to read more of the books. I have read all of Frank Herbert's books except I haven't got around to Chapter House Dune yet. That's the last one I need to get through. But anyway, that's the introduction, glowing review. If you haven't read Dune, go and read it. It's amazing. If you like science fiction, it's awesome. But the structure that I have in mind for this video, so you can see I've already pointed out I've taken a lot of notes in this book, but they are color-coded for specific reasons, and I'm going to start, pretty much this video is just going to be a journey from the start to the end of the book in post-it notes, but going by different colors. So the first one I'm going to go through are the pink tags, and these are the ones that are differences in the book and the film. And the reason why I do it is so that if you've maybe only seen the film and you want a bit of a taste of what some of the differences are, then you can kind of still watch the first part of this video, and we reach an arbitrary cutoff point, a halfway point. I don't know why I'm showing you this, there's no way it would be clear enough to see, but obviously the pink tags do cut off because the movie is only the first half of the Dune book. But what's cool is that after that, you can kind of stop watching if you've only seen the film. But then I'm going to go back to the start again and cover the orange tags, which are just cool things that I've highlighted, things that I really love about the book. To help mitigate the time, I'm not going to do a plot summary. That's going to take so much extra time. After I've crossed, for the first half of the video, I'm going to assume you've at least seen the movie. After I pass that, I'm going to assume you've not only read the book, but I am going to start talking spoilers for more books in the series, at least until God Emperor, or at least including God Emperor. Actually, no, maybe just including, maybe just until God Emperor. But anyway, without further ado, let's get started. And also there aren't, before we get started, there aren't as many notes as it may seem because a lot of them are just section markers, a lot of the purple ones. But let's just jump in. I'm going to go through chronologically from the start of the book and find our first film moment. So there's one of the awesome features of Dune, which I think heavily inspired a lot of authors, namely Brandon Sanderson, is that the starts of the chapters have these awesome little kind of quotes. A lot of them are written by Princess Irulan, and I highlighted this as a book v film moment because this is from Manual of Muad'Dib by Princess Irulan, and it goes as follows. On that first day when Muad'Dib rode through the streets of Arrakeen with his family, some of the people along the way recalled the legends and the prophecy, and they ventured to shout Mahdi, but their shout was more a question than a statement. For as yet they could only hope he was one foretold as the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world. Their attention was focused too on the mother, because they had heard she was a Bene Gesserit, and it was obvious to them that she was like the other Lisan al-Gaib. And I highlighted this because it's pretty much what happens in the film, except I wanted to give a shout out to the film for having such a masterful inserting of so many things in that scene where they come on Arrakis. So starts with this awesome just bagpipe, just blaring, and that scene has not only this with the natives shouting Mahdi, but they also, in the film, they take that time for Paul and Jessica to talk about the Missionaria Protectiva. They talk, I think, a little bit about bloodlines, but they definitely talk about how the Bene Gesserit, used this Missionary Protectiva to manipulate the people. And I really loved that point in the film because they covered like 2 or 3 important key book concepts that they were not able to fit into the film because obviously a lot of things had to be cut out, not least of which being the dinner scene, which we will get to. But I wanted to shout that out because that was a really, really awesome part of the film. The screenwriter, they really pulled it off, and they got so many things just perfectly in that short moment. We'll skip through to see. So again, there are a lot of things like a lot of characters that I'm going to want to talk about. I'm going to talk about Yue, I'm going to talk about Baron Harkonnen, but I'll talk to them as they come up in the notes. Book versus film, Damn the Spice. So this, as you will recall, is when Duke Leto and the entourage with Liet Kynes, who, if you don't know, if you've only seen the movie, Liet Kynes is a woman in the movie, but is a man in the book. And so whenever I'm referring to book Liet, movie Liet, I'm just going to use the appropriate he or she. It's not that hard to follow. I'm sure you'll be fine. But Duke and Liet Kynes are in, and this is another book versus film where they just nailed it. It was so good, of Duke Leto just screaming, "Damn the spice, we can always get more spice, there are seats in our ship for all but 3 of you," and then they start throwing out like shields and stuff. And this is actually something where the movie almost, I think I'm going to commit to this, and I'm going to say the movie does this better. The movie, because what happens in the book is they're going out to the spice, and they're going out to get the spice, and there's meant to be a carryall that shows up, but one of them just doesn't show up, and it's revealed that it's because of some Harkonnen sabotage, whatever. But in the film, the carryall is there, but when they come and they try to attach it to the spice extractor, I forget what the name is, it breaks, and it's this great moment because previously they were like, the Harkonnens left this place in such terrible condition, which is even mentioned in here, and it was just such an awesome moment. I remember seeing this in the film, and I was like, what a genius idea for just bringing those two together. And it is a shame because, it can be a bit different, but I just thought that was such a great idea. And that's why, even though the exact "damn the spice, we'll go get, come on, mate," is exactly the same, I still took a note there because, God, what a freaking good moment in the film. And it's even a good moment in the book because even though you can be critical of the save the cat concept, that's such a perfect save the cat. If there were ever a moment that you needed to know that Duke Leto Atreides was just the daddiest of daddies, Boom, it's right there. Oh my god. Anyway, you'll notice this is not a pink tag, but this is the dinner scene, which was completely cut out of the film, unfortunately. But I can see why, and I'm not going to dawdle on this because it will come back in a little bit, but just for some context, again, for people who have only seen the film, there is a great dinner scene that happens in Dune after the Spice misadventure, where the thing gets eaten by a sandworm, where there are a lot of guests from kind of, I think, house minors, but usually minor, minor, not minor. But really the important people that are at this dinner is a water shipper named Butte, who through this great like espionage, we're jumping back and forth between people's perspectives, especially Lady Jessica and Paul. We're kind of figuring out that he's a Harkonnen agent, but there's also an important person who I think, if I remember, is completely cut from the film, Esmar Tuek, who is a smuggler. And the reason that he's very important is because he is where Gurney and Thufir go after the Harkonnens attack. But I'll get to that. Because in the film, they just disappear, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but after the attack, I know Thufir Howard definitely just disappears and we never see him again. I can't remember about Gurney, but I have a feeling that he also disappeared. Maybe after I've uploaded this video, if I watch the movie, I'll see the comments and correct it. But book versus film, Dr. Yue, one of the big characters that was unfortunately criminally underdeveloped in the film. Dr. Yue, as you will remember, is the traitor in the Atreides family. And the thing that was such a disappointment in the movie was that it only took one or two lines to have a great click moment for the audience to see that Yue really knew what he was talking about. And basically, contrasting film and book, in the film, Dr. Yue thinks that Baron Harkonnen has captured his wife and is like betraying the Atreides in order to have a chance to see her or to save her. Granted, in the movie, they don't go that much into his imperial conditioning, so it doesn't seem like as big a deal that he could like possibly not be the traitor. But they do very much go into the imperial conditioning in the book, but the book is so much better because you really know 100%. You were dead anyway, my poor Duke, Yue said, but you will get close to the Baron before you die. He will believe you're stupefied by drugs beyond any dying effort to attack him, and you will be drugged and tired, but attack can take strange forms, and you will remember the tooth. The tooth, Duke Leto Atreides, you will remember the tooth. So it's so clear in the book that Yue he knows that the Atreides have already lost, and he takes this sacrifice. He even admits before seeing the Baron, he knows his wife is dead, but he was able to see the entire situation and just knew that the Harkonnens were going to win. There was going to be some shit, but being a traitor was worth it just to give the opportunity for Duke Leto to get close and eventually try to kill him. And so that was a shame, because in the movie, when Yue attacks, stuns Duke Leto Atreides, while he's talking to him, he could have said something like that. He could have said, I'm sorry, but we were doomed anyway. This is our only chance. And it just didn't happen, and that was unfortunate. That was probably the saddest thing, one of the saddest cuts or underdevelopments of a character in the film. But I'll also get to Baron Harkonnen. But anyway, the next one that I have is book versus film, Paul and Jessica use the voice in the Thopter. So this is when they're getting taken out, and there's the deaf guy. It's really, reading this, I think, will be quite starkly different to people because it's so weirdly funny at times. Lady Jessica is saying things, look, just gentlemen, no need to fight over me, and she's really using the voice in this kind of really creepy, insidious way of it. It's not like in the film, which, don't get me wrong, I really love how they did the voice in the film and it's so epic, but in this one, in the book, they really talk about how she listens, or people who use the voice, like her and Paul, listen, and they get the person that they're going to use them. They've got them, and she subtly uses the voice, and it's not this scary, terrifying thing. It's this, eerily seductive way, and it feels way more funny and light-hearted when you read the book compared to what happens in the movie, which is very actiony. And yeah, I wanted to point it out because I think that for people reading the book, this will actually be a pleasant surprise. I know that when I watched the movie, I was sure that the movie was verbatim for how this voice in the Thopter scene happened, but going back and reading it was so pleasant. And then there's also this hilarious moment where they're getting out of the Thopter and Paul does this janky jump and kicks one of them right in the correct place in the abdomen for it to go up and explode his heart, and it's just so funny to read. I don't know why, but it's just so weird, and it's kind of goofy, to be honest, but it's pleasant compared to the movie. Book and film Poison Tooth. So this leads into a deeper issue that I have, and I'm going to talk about the Baron Harkonnen now. So much of the Poison Tooth happens the same in the book, happens the same in the movie as it does in the book. Peter, the Baron's mentat, dies, but in the movie, Duke is calling, trying to call the Baron Harkonnen over to him, and the Baron Harkonnen edges forward, and then he's like, wait a minute, turns on his shield, and then he leans forward. Duke lets out the poison, and some of the poison gets into the Baron, but the shield was enough to kind of protect him, and everyone else died except him. And then in the movie, there's this, that awesome scene of him coming up from the sludge pool, which was such a cool vibe. And that's how the Poison Tooth scene goes in the movie. Everyone dies except the Baron, who survives. It also happens like this in the book. However, it's just in the book, it's this really weird, coincidence where the Baron just sort of, jumps out of the way or, quickly edges out of the room, and the reason, and somehow he survives, and it's really, heard the gasp, got Peter as well, and the Baron. Well, I'll read this. He's just saying, the Baron stood with his back against his private door, his own bolt hole behind the table, so he's just run out of the room. He had slammed it on a room full of dead men. His senses took in guards swarming around him. Did I breathe it? He asked himself. Whatever it was in there. Did it get me too? And then blah, 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 blah. The others fell quickly, he thought. I'm still standing. I'm still breathing. Merciless hell. That was close. And reading this made me remember how much of a flawed character the Baron is, and how, he was powerful enough and smart enough to kind of outsmart the Duke Leto Atreides, whose fatal flaw was, just being too good for a place like Arrakis. But him surviving this Poison Tooth in this way, I remember the first time I read it being like, this is so lame. Why are we why did this happen like this? But rereading it, I think it's actually this awesome moment of showing that really the Baron is just sort of stumbling along. And especially once you get into the second half of the book, post what's happened in the film, with how the Baron talks to the Emperor, how he's trying to navigate his relationship with Feyd-Rautha, it really kind of imparts how much of a flawed character and how just really, not one-dimensionally evil he is, but that's exactly how he is in the book. And I'm having a hard time imagining the Baron from the 2021 film being anything like this, but he kind of has to be in the second half, especially for the Baron's spoiler alert again, if we're still talking about book people, for the Baron's fate at the end with her. Anyway, yeah, right? Like call me crazy, but the Baron is so one-dimensionally smart and evil in the film, and I have no idea how they're going to change that. But yeah, moving on to the next one. Book versus film, Paul in the tent after Leto dies. I think this is actually more or less the same in the book, although it's split over a couple of different events. But one of the big things that's different is in the film, we just find out that Yue betrayed them, and it's a bit like whatever. In the book, one of the many things that was important was that there was an ambiguity as to who the traitor was. They knew they knew that there was a traitor, but they didn't know if it was Thufir. They didn't know if it was Gurney. Thufir and Gurney think it's Lady Jessica, and Duke Atreides, in order to save face and to further investigate, pretended that he thought Lady Jessica was the traitor as well, so that he could get close to the others and find out who was actually the traitor, because he knew that Lady Jessica would never betray them. That's how much faith he had in her. But he couldn't even tell her that he thought this. He only told Paul very briefly. And there's this whole great, and that's another reason why the dinner scene is so good. Oh my god. But that's why I put a note, even though there's a lot of the, Paul is starting to have some spice visions. He's saying, you've made me into a freak, blah, 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 all this same stuff from the film. But there is also that point where Paul is like, Dad never doubted you. Now we can mourn. And it's such a freaking good moment. Oh man. If I haven't imparted on you by now, we haven't crossed the halfway point for spoilers. If you've only seen the movie, please, I implore you to come and read this book. Oh my god. So, again, book versus film, Haywet and Gurney after the Harkonnen attack. I think this is just where I put this when they're talking about Thufir Hawat. He's talking with Freeman smugglers, and Haywet finds out that Gurney is still alive, which is awesome, and then some things happen. Spoilers, so I'm not going to say them yet. But it's true. The spoiler is where Haywet turns out, or where he ends up. Sorry, and so I'm not going to talk about that. But I thought it was really good that. Or I thought it was really bad in the film that Haywet and Gurney just sort of disappear after the battle. However, one of the things that happens much better in the film, which again, this was something that watching the film, I thought they did this verbatim to how it was in the book. I cannot believe how quickly Duncan dies. So in the book, Paul, Jessica, and Liet Kynes are just talking shit. They're talking about the plan, the same sort of thing. How we're going to attack the Emperor. He's got a daughter, Irulan, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, you just see, blah, they're shouting, whatever. With his mother beside him, Paul leapt for the door, seeing Idaho blocking the passage. His blood-pitted eyes there visible through a shield blur. claw hands beyond him, arcs of steel chopping futilely at the shield. They're getting attacked by the Sardaukar, and this just happens. Like, Duncan just dies, and he does the same sort of, Atreides salute, ciao. But he's given such a better send-off in the movie, and so that's another point in favor for the movie, in my opinion. But yeah. So, book versus film, Paul and Jessica's encounter with the worm after the flight. So this is a bit weird in that there's actually 2 encounters with the worm, maybe 3 encounters, as opposed to in the movie where there's just the one encounter where they run, they see the worm, another Fremen somewhere sets off a thumper and the worm gets called away. That happens in the movie, and it's just awesome, like beautifully stunning moment where we see the worm for the first time in full gloriousness. And it's funny, this that pretty much happens the exact same way in the book, but there are some other things. So we see they do have to like run away from a worm. The first time, it's the worm that like eats the ornithopter to kind of prove to any scouts that Paul and Jessica are definitely dead. But yeah, there's another note that's tied to this. Book versus film, losing gear in the desert. So there's an awesome kind of sleight of hand that happens in the movie where after the scene where Paul and Jessica are in the tent, Paul has the visions, I'm a freak, I'm your mother, blah 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 blah, and they cry about Duke Leto. When they wake up in the morning, the tent's been completely submerged by sand. They use a sand compactor to get out, but then they have to leave all the stuff there. And that was really cool as a way of just getting them to like ditch some shit so that they could move on and eventually find the Fremen. But in this, they have this moment where Paul and Jessica are climbing down a sand dune, and then it just tumbles on top of them, and Jessica actually gets stuck underneath, and Paul's like panicking, but then I'm going to do a little interjection into an orange note here. She's been caught in the sand slide, he thought, buried in it. I must be calm and work this out carefully. She won't smother immediately. She'll compose herself in Bindu suspension to reduce her oxygen needs. She knows I'll dig for her. And that's a cool little... Firstly, it's something that's just really cool. It's also a little subtle nod to what will happen later with Paul. No more spoilers in that regard. But anyway, they dig him out, and then there's this kind of moment where Paul digs Jessica out, and she's like, oh, we lost the pack. And I'd forgotten that they dig it back out, because I was like, oh, that's how they lost their shit in the book. But then, no, they go through this whole intricate procedure of crafting this thingamajig by like spitting in it and with spice and stuff, and it helps them get the stuff back, and they've got the tent, and then they just have it again. And I don't know, like, it's obviously a good moment because, they're becoming really resourceful. They're really finding out that they have nothing. They're stuck on Arrakis. Jessica is sort of still in denial about not drinking her stillsuit water because she doesn't want this to become a reality. All of these awesome things that are not in the movie, but you can understand why they were cut out. Anyway, we're edging close, though, as you can probably imagine, to the end of the book versus film comparisons. But book versus film, Chani introduction, tangent. There's no way. I love you, Frank Herbert. I do, with all my heart. But I will never pronounce her name Chaney. Oh my gosh. I love that everyone just decided he was wrong. Every single media adaptation ever has just called her Chani and not Chaney. Anyway, in this edition that I have, the 50th anniversary edition, Chani, I almost said Chaney just as a joke. Chani is not mentioned by name until page 304, which I thought was really interesting because I I didn't necessarily remember this, but there are so many prescient visions in the movie of him seeing Chani and talking about her. Really, in the book, it's just after the Gom Jabbar, which is probably another surprise for readers. The Gom Jabbar scene happens within the first 10 pages, which is really awesome. But after the Gom Jabbar, Paul talks to the Reverend Mother. I forget her name. Guy in Hellas. I'm sure I said all of those wrong. Mahayam. I think all three of those were wrong. But anyway, he talks briefly about a girl that he's going to meet on Arrakis, and tell me about the waters of your homeworld, Usul. Paul says, but yeah, Chani is not mentioned by name all the way up until after the whole encounter. That pretty much goes exactly the same in the book as it does in the film. With them running after the worm gets called away, and then they meet the Fremen, they meet Stilgar, convince both of them to be brought into the tribe. The one big difference, which even though here I've got a big tag, which is end of film, so 309, on this page here, the page before, 308, that's when they're walking, just like in the movie, they see Fremen like riding on the backs of sandworms, and that's the end of the film. But we're not quite at book versus film comparisons, because I will just quickly say, even though a lot of it happens the same, the fight scene with Jamis happens later on in the book, only after they've gotten back to the Siege Tabur. But that's okay. Don't have any more comments on that. So, cut, slam, dash from here. We're talking book spoilers, full book spoilers, and I'm even talking maybe God Emperor spoilers up to God Emperor. But I'm going to do a bit of quick skipping, because I think if I remember correctly, I had another book versus potential film moment, and it's Raban's death, where this is such a weird moment, because I want to talk briefly about, I was listening to Brandon Sanderson and Dan Wells' podcast Intentionally Blank, where they were talking about Dune and they were raving about it. But Brandon Sanderson said that he was really, he believed that they were going to meld Raban and Feyd-Rautha into one person. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, yeah, I think that actually works, because there's not been, the movie completely cut out any of the Barons kind of, let's make Raban this terrible figure and then usurp him and bring in Feyd-Rautha as a kind of savior figure, opposite but the same as Paul. And so that's why, and I remembered why I made this note. If you guys think back, I don't know if you've watched the David Lynch Dune film. For all the shit that film gets, and it deserves a lot of shit, go back and re-watch it, because the first half of that film is perfect. It's like so good, and it's really only after the halfway point that the film goes to shit. And actually, it doesn't go to shit. To quote David Foster Wallace, the studio execs came in, cut like 20 plus minutes of the film, and it renders it literally incomprehensible. If you have not read the book, you'll have no idea what's going on. And if you have read the book, you'll be pissed the whole time. Oh my God. Anyway, but that's why I'm thinking that there's going to need to be some seriously heavy adaptation in the second half, in the second part of Dune. I know that the first half of the second movie is going to be fucking awesome, because just think about how they're going to do all of the Water of Life scenes and everything. Oh man, that's going to be so goddamn good. But I will admit, I'm worried about the ending. I don't know how it's going to be. I don't know how they're going to tie up all these things. And even even Fade Rautha in the film, it's kind of weird. Like he doesn't interact with Paul at all, and until the very end where he has to fight Paul. And I was thinking about this. I was like, why is this even happening? Is this like a subtext battle? Is this, and I maybe need to think about it more, but Fade Rautha really only serves to be this antagonistic point bouncing against the Baron and exposing the Baron's weaknesses, but he hasn't been brought up at all in the film. But he did get announced. There is going to be someone acting as Fade Rautha, and again, to continue Brandon Sanderson, it should just be Sting again wearing what he wore in the Lynch film. But anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about. I'll probably talk about some more book v filmed potentials, but we're going to do rewind time. I'm going to go back to the start, and I'm going to skip through the orange tags that I have, which is just the really awesome stuff, like the cool shit in Dune, that I just want to do point out. So, actually, there's one blue tag here. I think it's because I ran out. Of orange tags, but I guess it fits because of the blue eyes. But I don't know if this is something that happens off screen or if it's a very, very early, subtle kind of implication or introducing of the ambiguity of prescience. But when Paul is talking to the Reverend Mother about the visions he's having and saying the same thing that I said before, tell me about the waters of your homeworld, Usul. Paul opened his eyes. Isn't that strange? My homeworld's Caladan. I've never heard of the planet called Usul. He tells her a poem from Gurney Halleck, and I don't think this happens in the book. But I do distinctly remember that there's a part near the end of the book where Chani says, tell me again about your home world, Usul. And he avoids the conversation and says, I'd rather hear about blah, 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 blah. And so I don't know if I'm misremembering. I don't know if he does do something like this or if it's implied that it happened off screen. But I thought that could have maybe been a really cool, introducing the inconsistency of his prescience, which they do so well in the movie as well. Maybe you need to watch the movie a few times to really track and trace everything. But they do so well in just Paul will see visions of him having conversations with Jamis, who he eventually kills. They'll see Paul getting killed, which he does not in the film so far. But not a spoiler. Come on, by this point, all the people who have watched the film should have checked out anyway, so come on, that's on you. But yeah, and I'm going to take a tangent. I know I'm already when we're edging on 40 minutes here, but I want to take a tangent to talk about how much on reading first and rereading, I adore the way Frank Herbert did the prescience, because, it's such a common thing to just be like, oh yeah, you can see the future, there's all these multitude, infinite timelines, blah, 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 blah. But I absolutely love that in Dune, mostly mediumly in this book, but especially in the later books, he really sets up prescience in this way that, yes, there are infinite potential timelines and little choices can kind of have drastic results. But some futures have such a strong gravity that whether you like it or not, the branching potential futures are still so drawn that they're eventually going to lead to this thing. The big thing, in this film at least, is the Butlerian Jihad, which, again, I'm talking spoilers here, happens anyway in Dune Messiah. But then later on with the Golden Path, where, there are all of these kind of futures that are eventually leading to stagnation, and Paul and Leto II are desperately trying to find this perfect, intricate golden path that saves humanity. And I love that so much. That's such an awesome take on prescience, where yes, there are infinite futures, but because of things that have already been set up, some of the futures, not all infinite futures are equally possible. And even if you try to do something to intentionally direct it, the gravity of that one future, the one that leads to a Butlerian jihad, is so strong that even if you try it, there's going to be some other thing that points you back there anyway. And if I remember correctly, I remember that being a big thing in the second and third Dune books. But anyway, I think it's about time we start with the orange tags. These are going to be shorter, so don't worry. This is when... and so some of these are going to be cool things that I liked about the writing. Some of these are going to be just like general praise for the book or general speculation. But yeah, the first one is when Jessica is talking to Yue, and there's this awesome subtle little kind of mind battle where Yue is trying to kind of disguise the fact that he's a traitor, and he has this really kind of great moment where he feigns embarrassment, and he says, "I believe it has worked. Now she'll think anything unusual in my manner is due to embarrassment. She'll not look for deeper reasons when she believes she already knows the answer." And it's this awesome little moment because Frank Herbert's writing really never lets you think that it's always one step ahead, especially in the first half of the book, which is a bit of a shame that it's different in the movie, but it had to be different. If you've gone and seen big old motorbike, if you've gone and seen the David Lynch film, David Lynch says, "You know what? We're going to solve this problem the hard way," and they actually just do voiceovers of what the characters are thinking. And in my opinion, it's charming. Up to you guys whether you think it's going to work. But that's an awesome little Yue Jessica moment. The next one that we've got is, this is a subtle little thing. So at the start of one of the chapters and again in this edition, it's page 71, it was after Yue gave Paul and Jessica the sleeping drug. Paul lay on the bed feigning sleep. It had been easy to palm Dr. Yue's sleeping tablet, to pretend to swallow it. Paul suppressed a laugh. Even his mother had believed him asleep. And that's a cool little moment because in the very, very beginning of the book, Lady Jessica and the lady, I'm going to get her name right this time because it will be here, the Reverend Mother, they walk in... Oh, I don't know if I can see her name. They walk in and they can tell that he's not actually sleeping. And so that was a cool little moment on reread, just to be like, oh, he's gotten better. He's kind of transcending, developing beyond just his mother's teachings. And oh yeah, there's this cool moment where back to the Yue and Jessica, again, sorry, this is going to be jumping around a little bit, but it's mostly chronological. When Jessica first walks into Yue, in that interaction that I talked about just then, Yue is looking out the window, and Jessica is like, oh, what's he looking at? Is he contemplating something? And then later on in the book, there's a signal coming out, and it's never explicitly mentioned, but it's probably what Yue was looking at when he was looking at it during the day. He was trying to see where the signal would come from. And I was like, oh, that's a cool little bit of kind of tension and release. Some character development. Paul, or the Duke Leto Atreides, is talking about, some shit that's gone down. And Duke Leto Atreides says this. "Well, gentlemen," he said, "our civilization appears to have fallen so deeply into the habit of invasion that we cannot even obey a simple order of the Imperium without the old ways cropping up. Dry chuckles sounded around the table, and Paul realized that his father had said the precisely correct thing in the precisely correct tone to lift the mood here. Even the hint of fatigue in his voice was right. And it's this great moment. I know I'm saying great moment so many times. It's just a personal ism, I guess. Sorry about that if you're getting bored, or if that phrase is grating, but it's sometimes grating to me. Anyway, I'm not going to waste any time where, oh man, yeah, I'm asking people to commit an hour to this. Anyway, it's a awesome occurrence in the book to really show the competence of Duke Leto Atreides, and that even though he doesn't have Bene Gesserit training, is not a Reverend Mother, obviously, he can still hold his own with his own voice, the power of his own voice, and really stresses that you know he's a force to be reckoned with, even if he eventually does not survive and does not make it out. I really liked this. It's from the collected sayings of Muad'Dib, the start of the chapter on page 110. There's probably no more terrible instant of enlightenment than the one in which you discover your father is a man with human flesh. Just an awesome little thing. Frank Herbert has got such a way with words, many words, you might even say. This is something cool. So it's when Liet Kynes, the Duke, I think they're about to go out to the spice harvesting. Duke spots, is like, oh, I see a flying object over there. And Kynes says, it's merely a bird, you have sharp eyes. Duke says, I'd not realized there were birds that large this far into the desert, the Duke said. That's likely an eagle, Kynes said. Many creatures have adapted to this place. And I actually took two marginalia notes here. The first was when I first read it, and I said, maybe a stretch, but the eagle could be a close enough hawk, showing the Atreides adaptation to Dune. And I thought that was all right, but then as I read through, I got to Liet Kynes' death, and there's this great moment. I'm going to talk about it, but I realized that the eagle also ties into how Liet Kynes dies in the book, which is a little bit different than in the movie. Maybe just in case, I'll say it now. Liet Kynes has this awesome moment where he's been stranded in the desert without a still suit by the Harkonnens, and he's having these hallucinations of talking to his father, or of his father talking to him and lecturing him on the ecology of Arrakis. And it's a cool moment, but it also is this weird kind of subtle reference to a lot of the prescient problems that are going to happen in the later Dune books, especially with what happens to Elia, and I really like it a lot. Firstly, it's a great moment. It's much more riveting and engaging than how Liet Kynes dies in the books, in the movie, where she just gets kind of stabbed by some Sardaukar, and yeah, she still gets to have, the whole, my maker is Shai Hulud, gets eaten by a sandworm, and that's really cool. But yeah, nothing like how Liet Kynes dies in the book. Much more preferred. There are many strange sayings in the desert, Butte said, but his voice betrayed uneasiness. This is during the dinner scene. Earlier on, Kynes is vibing out, trying to see if Lady Jessica and Paul are matching the prophecy that he knows and that all Freeman know. Kynes' thoughts were overwhelmed at last by the words of prophecy, and they shall share your most precious dream. He spoke directly to Jessica. Do you bring the shortening of the way? Skip down a little bit. Jessica crossed to Leto, slipped her hand under his arm to gain a moment in which to calm herself. Kynes had said, the shortening of the way. In the old tongue, the phrase translated as Kwisatz Haderach, which is what Paul is. Another awesome moment of Bene Gesserit, influence, missionary protectiva, all schemes and plans and shenanigans. So good. And yeah, I can actually skip that one because I think I already talked about it. But a interaction between Jessica and Thufir Howard where that this is so funny. Has it already happened or did I miss it? Oh yeah, this is such a funny moment uh, where it kind of reiterates that Frank Herbert can be quite funny sometimes. I mentioned before that Thufir Howard strongly suspected Jessica of being the traitor. They go amongst some. They meet up. She summons them, and then says, "What?" Jessica says, "What brought this base suspicion on me?" She asked. Hayward frowned. "My lady puts her servant in an impossible position. My first loyalty is to the Duke. I'm prepared to forgive much because of that loyalty," she said. "And again I must ask, is there something to forgive?" "Stalemate?" she says. He shrugged. Just a funny little interaction, you know. And then later on, after Lady Jessica has used the voice on Hayward to just really be like, "Man, don't mess with me because I could do some serious shit to you." Hayward is like, "Man, these guys could be, or these ladies could be on top of the universe." But Jessica responds, "Power's a two-edged sword, Thufir. You think how easy for her to shape a human tool to thrust into an enemy's vitals. True, Thufir, even into your vitals. Yet, what would I accomplish? If enough of us Bene Gesserit did this, wouldn't it make all Bene Gesserit suspect? We don't want that, Thufir. We do not wish to destroy ourselves," she nodded. "We truly exist only to serve." Which, I don't know, that's, if you read later on, that's full of shit. Like, they're serving themselves, but they exist. They're trying everything possible to make themselves not stand out and to not get hunted like witches, witches. But there's a great concept. You can tell I'm trying to think of synonyms for cool and awesome. There's a great concept that I so wish was developed on in either the second or the third Dune book. They allude to the fact that Bene Gesserits have such a great control over their body that they could stop their aging completely. And I was like, if there's anybody who would do this, or the reason they don't do this is because they, like, if anyone saw them, they would just hunt them down and would know that it's terrible. So none of them do it, which is awesome in its own right. But I thought if there was ever anyone who was going to do this, it would be Lady Jessica, and that would have been such an awesome thing to see. Again, I haven't read Chapter House Dune, so I don't know if it happens. I know that they just say that Lady Jessica lived out her days on Caladan after the events of Children of Dune. But yeah, that was just something that came to my mind. I was like, of course Jessica's gonna do this. She's that sort of rebel. But anyway, she produced the abomination, so what more could she do? The Freemen have a saying they credit to Shai Hulud, old father enemy, he said. They say, "Be prepared to appreciate what you meet." Cool little bit of Fremen wisdom. This is when Paul and Jessica are hiding out in the tent. A really cool moment. Presently, Paul stood beside her, said, "Duncan told me that if he was captured, he could hold out this long. We must leave here now." And like, Paul, we can just really feel that Paul is ascending. He's becoming so consciously aware. He's keeping track of everything. And a great way to just punctually show that in a tiny sentence. Some more Freeman. I keep saying Freeman, even though I know it's Fremen. The Fremen. Yeah, I think it's meant to be Fremen. Any man who retreats into a cave which has only one opening deserves to die. Cool little wisdom. I wonder if that comes in later. I can't really think about it right now. I already talked about the Bindu suspension. Paul and Jessica after the still tent, but before meeting Stilgar, Paul spoke without turning. I find myself enjoying the quiet here, and Jessica thinks, how the mind gears itself for its environment, she thought, and she recalled a Bene Gesserit axiom. The mind can go either direction under stress, toward positive or toward negative, on or off. Think of end and hyperconsciousness at the positive end. Oh, sorry, I just read that wrong. Think of it as a spectrum whose extremes are consciousness at the unconsciousness at the negative end and hyperconsciousness at the positive end. The way the wind will lean under stress is strongly influenced. I think this might be the first edit that I need to do, or I'll just read it again. How the mind gears itself for its environment, she thought, and she recalled a Bene Gesserit axiom. The mind can go either direction under stress, towards positive or towards negative, on or off. Think of it as a spectrum whose extremes are unconsciousness at the negative end and hyperconsciousness at the positive end. The way the mind will lean under stress is strongly influenced by training. Great. Man. So many of these things are just going to be me being like, how smart is Frank Herbert? Oh, I love him. Natural sounds of the desert. I don't really need to mention that. Oh, and sorry, I did take a note of the Liet Kynes death, but I already talked about it, so I can skip that. And here's another Freeman wisdom. Oh my gosh, page 309 from the start of the chapter, from Wisdom of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. The Fremen were supreme in that quality the ancients called Spannungsbogen, which is the self-imposed delay between desire for a thing and the act of reaching out to grasp that thing. Talk about a masterclass in just describing in punctually describing a people. Another thing that Stilgar's talking about, a leader, you see, is one of the things that distinguishes a mob from a people. Man, that becomes such a big thing. Frank Herbert got so into that by the time he's writing God Emperor of Dune. So, this is, I think, around the time when Paul is having some deep spice-induced prescient trances. And the section I highlighted was, the prescience, he realized, was an illumination that incorporated the limits of what it revealed, at once a source of accuracy and meaningful error. A kind of Heisenberg indeterminacy intervened, the expenditure of energy that revealed what he saw, changed what he saw. Which, aside from being a callback to what I was talking about with the inconsistency of prescience, the fact that Heisenberg, like the Heisenberg indeterminacy, is actually mentioned by name is something that shouldn't come as a surprise, because it's very obvious that Dune is set in the real world and that the Freemen are like actual Muslim people. The language, they talk about the Hajj. There are names. It actually isn't in this book, but later on they start to refer to Shai Hulud as Shaitan, which is a name of like a demon-like figure from the Quran. But the reason that I highlighted it as well is because there's this really janky moment in Dune Messiah where Paul Atreides actually mentions Adolf Hitler by name. And I was like, man, like I know in my heart that this book is set in a very far future, but from the real world. The original Catholic Bible is here, or the orange Catholic Bible, and so on and so forth. But it was weird that it felt janky in Dune Messiah, but it doesn't feel janky here. But maybe it did, because I did note it, and I was like, Heisenberg, like it was an actual thing. Just a balance, and I think it gets a little bit worse in, with that example I already mentioned in Dune Messiah, but I don't think it becomes much more of a thing. Cool cool insight that Paul has when he's trying to balance when he's trying to navigate his prescience. He realizes that my mother is my enemy. She does not know it, but she is. She is bringing the jihad. She bore me. She trained me. She is my enemy. And that's something that I think the second part of the film is going to really need to lean into, is this conflict between Paul and the Lady Jessica. Because there's already, in the film, there's already goodness, uncontent, mix those around to make them work, especially by the end and after the tent scene. But they do, it's funny, in the second half of the book, he really is like, oh, she's my enemy, but then he kind of just forgets it, and he's like, oh no, I figure it out, and then they move on. And there are some maybe more Jessica v Paul moments in Children of Dune. She's almost completely gone from Dune Messiah. I think she just kind of chills out back on Caladan, but then she comes back into it in Children of Dune. But yeah. Oh my god, this was such a great moment. So, Lady Jessica has just taken the water of life. Paul is trying to talk to her, and Lady Jessica says, I'm like a person whose hands were kept numb, without sensation from the first moment of awareness, until one day the ability to feel is forced on them. The thought hung in her mind, an enclosing awareness, and I said, look, I have hands, but the people all around me say, what are hands? If you guys know David Foster Wallace's essay, This is Water, two fish are swimming along and they come across an older fish. The older fish says, howdy boys, how's the water? The two fish swim along, and then all of a sudden one of the fish turns to the other and says, wait, what the hell is water? Just a funny little moment. I think the what the hell is water is a little bit more profound to this than this Dune example, but it was a funny little thing that I referenced and that I remembered, and I wanted to reference it because David Foster Wallace did like the Dune book a lot. And on this same page, actually, he pretty much right after that, Paul goes, oh, you all right? Yeah. Is this all right for me to drink? They want me to drink it. And she says she thinks she heard the hidden meaning in his words, realized he had detected the poison in the original, unchanged substance, that he was concerned for her. It occurred to Jessica to wonder about the limits of Paul's prescience. This question revealed much to her. And I think that even if it was maybe a little bit late, this came at a good time to re-establish the competence of the Lady Jessica, because Paul really just starts to move on past, and it's kind of seemed like Lady Jessica is just getting forgotten. But yeah, that was an awesome little segment. So I took this note. It's obvious that Dune and Frank Herbert was very inspired by a lot of religious ideas, and religion is very important in all of the Dune books. A cool phrase. They're talking about Aaliyah and about the discontent that she's sowing in the communities. And I'll read a section. Chani looked toward the growing line of the sunrise. Some of the women banded to appeal to the Reverend Mother. They demanded she exorcise the demon in her daughter. They quoted the scripture, "Suffer not a witch to live among us," which I realized comes from none other than the OG Catholic Bible, Exodus 22:18. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And so there are already some influences from Islamic culture, but it's cool that the fact that quote made it into the Fremen sphere and is adapted and changed shows that Frank Herbert has this incredible knack for imagining the subtle changes of religious sayings, proverbs, and ideologies over a long series, over many generations. And if that's something that you really like about Dune, then you owe it to yourself to power through and keep reading the rest, the rest of the books. This note is after Paul's son, Leto, dies. "My son is dead," Paul said, and he knew he spoke it as it's true. "My son is dead, and Leah is a captive, hostage." And my marginalia note was, "On both first and second reads, I feel that the inclusion of a son is forced and unnecessary, especially considering the son never appears in person and only serves as a way to bring Jessica and Chani together, plus some tension here, but it falls flat." Let me know what you guys think. I have always hated the existence of their first son. It feels so flat and unnecessary and one-dimensional, but whatever. This is a scene where Aaliyah has been captured. She is talking to the Reverend Mother, who, maybe I'll get her name right. If I can't find it in like 2 seconds, then I'm not gonna stress. Anyway, the Reverend Mother, "You babble, old woman," Aaliyah said. "You don't know how it was, yet you rattle on like a purblind fool." Aaliyah closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and held it. The old Reverend Mother groaned and staggered. Aaliyah opened her eyes. "That is how it was," she said. "A cosmic accident, and you played your part in it." So I don't know if this is just Aaliyah criticizing the Reverend Mother for training Jessica, or if it's an extremely subtle reference to the fact that the Reverend Mother is maybe Jessica's mother, and that the Reverend Mother was, I don't want to say the word because of YouTube algorithms, but was non-consensually impregnated by the Baron Harkonnen, because in all of the books that Frank Herbert actually wrote, we know the Baron is Lady Jessica's father, but we don't know who the mother is. It's just a Reverend Mother that's never mentioned. Apparently, in Frank Herbert's notes, it was going to be revealed in the last book that this Reverend Mother. Oh man, I feel bad. I have to find her name because I've done her dirty. And I can. Gaius Helen Mahayam. I can't wait to go back and see how badly I fucked that one up when I first said it. Gaius Helen Mahayam is apparently in Frank Herbert's notes. It was going to be revealed in the 7th book that she is Jessica's mother, and that's what Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson apparently did in the Dune books that they wrote to finish off the series. I'm not and probably never going to read those books, so I don't think of them as canon. But I thought that could be. That could have been some really forward-thinking planning from Frank Herbert if this is the case. Speaking of forward-thinking planning, or a lack thereof, "He is dead, beloved," Chani said. "Our son is dead." Holding himself under stiff control, Paul got to his feet. He reached out, touched Chani's cheek, feeling the dampness of her tears. "He cannot be replaced," Paul said, "but there will be other sons. It is Usul who promises this." And I don't know if this is Frank Herbert not realizing or not having yet planned that there are going to be twins in Children of Dune, or if this is actually a really, really subtle reference to the fact that Chani will become pregnant with twins, but because of Golden Path shenanigans, Paul can't see that one of the children. I think he can't tell. I have to go back and check this. I can't remember if he can't see Ganima or if he can't see Leto, but one of the two he can't visually see. I think it's Ganima, which would make sense why he says there will be sons, plural. But anyway, Either a coincidence or just a cool moment anyway. Here's an awesome little Thufir Hawat pithy statement. It's when it's in the final confrontation. Paul is facing the Emperor Shaddam Padish the Fourth. I think that's how his name is pronounced. And Thufir Hawat is on that side because of all the things. The Baron's been feeding him poison. He thought Lady Jessica, blah blah blah. But Paul confronts Thufir and says, "Thufir, old friend," Paul said, "as you can see, my back is toward no door. The universe is full of doors," Hawat said. Great moment. Love it. Okay, I think we've made it to the end. We've got one more little thing, and this is back further evidence to me, or this further reiterates some evidence that no, Frank Herbert actually did have things like the Golden Path in mind. He's talking about Paul and Fenring, and how in all of his prescient visions, Paul hasn't been able to see Fenring. Fenring? Yeah. Paul, aware of some of this from the time... we'll re-say this. Paul, aware of some of this from the way the time nexus boiled, understood at last why he had never seen Fenring along the webs of prescience. Fenring was one of the Might of Bins, an almost Kwisatz Haderach, crippled by a flaw in the genetic pattern, a eunuch. His talent concentrated into furtiveness and inner seclusion. A deep compassion for the Count flowed through Paul, the first sense of brotherhood he'd ever experienced. Great stuff. And really ties into what the Golden Path eventually needs to become, and all of the kind of breeding that Leto II does to lead to, is her name Siona? Thanks. If you're here, just fuck yeah, man. If you've made it to the end of this video, you're an absolute legend for indulging me in spending over an hour talking about Dune without talking about the plot at all, or without summarizing the plot. I feel like this is some weird zone. Like I feel like we're existing right now where sort of Heretics of Dune and Chapter House Dune exist in the zeitgeist, where if you've made it here, this is real shit. So thank you. I just want to give a big virtual hug to you guys and gals, for anyone who's bothered to stick through to the end. I don't have anything else to say, to be honest. I've just talked for ages about it. So just remember to keep reading. There will always be another book. I'll see you in the next, almost definitely shorter video than this one.